Welcome to the Lab to Table podcast, brought to you by Mérieux NutriSciences. In a world where the food industry is constantly evolving, we're here to help you break down the complexities. Join us as we sit down with some of the industry's leading experts to tackle critical food safety updates, decode shifting consumer trends, and deliver the actionable insights you need to stay ahead.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this latest edition of Lab to Table. I'm Mark Mantyla with Mérieux NutriSciences, and today I'm joined by one of our experts, Will Melnychenko, to talk a little bit about consulting. Will, how are you?
Great. Nice to be with you again, Mark. Thanks for having me.
So, Will, you've got quite the experience in consulting. You want to give us a little background on that?
Absolutely. So I've been in the food testing, inspection, and certification space for over 16 years, but I actually started my career in operations. I worked at the largest bakery in North America, so we often employed consultants for a variety of things in our facility, everything from Lean Six Sigma initiatives that we were working on in the plant that we needed some extra help with, to food safety and quality issues, unidentified spoilage organisms, for example, troubleshooting and root cause investigations that we just couldn't seem to get our arms around in our facility. So as some further background on the facility that in particular that I worked in, we had 3 unions and 4 labor agreements, and we actually did our own sanitation in the facility. And it was a dry facility. It was a commercial bakery. So sanitation was pretty challenging because we couldn't introduce water into the mix. So when we had issues like, with persistent spoilage organisms or molds or yeast, for example, it was quite difficult to kind of track them down and then also mitigate them. So we found bringing in consultants was quite helpful. So, and then, in my current role as the global business development director over digital and industry verticals at Mérieux, it's my pleasure to come into our customer sites and kind of talk to them about the advantages of bringing in an outside set of eyes through our consulting team, and also talk to our competitors, our other consultancies in the industry, to understand like what they're seeing out of the market and what the biggest challenges are with their customers. So that is kind of the totality of my expertise with consulting. So I could go on, but I'll yield back to you, Mark.
Well, no, that's good background to have. Today we're going to talk about consulting and kind of the misconceptions or stigmas that surround consultants. And I know some people, when their plant has a problem, they might be reluctant to call in consultants because, they just think a bunch of people in suits are going to come through. They think expensive. In your experience, what do you see as kind of this consultant stigma that you've had to overcome in the past?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think you're hitting the nail on the head there. I think when people hear the word consultant, they see dollar signs and they start to panic or think, these guys and gals are going to come into my plant and overcharge me or tell me what I already know. And that's really the stigma. I think based on that stigma, from my perspective, what I see is the organizations that could use the expertise the most, that would be those small and medium-sized organizations that are really looking to scale their businesses and grow, past that audit to supply to Costco or supply to Walmart. Those are the ones that are the most, I think, risk adverse or adverse to engaging consultants, because of the association of it being overly expensive. And then on the flip side, with some large scale producers, large name brands, we often get told, no, we have it handled. We have the expertise in house. We don't need consultants, for much the same reason. They think that it's going to be expensive. They think that it's going to be a very lengthy process, or that it's going to be a month-long project. When in actuality, there's, consulting can be tailored to fit the needs of any size organization. So that's really the stigma, the education that I try to give to, I guess, to remove that stigma, the education I try to give to our customers or prospective customers around the consultants is, it's not nearly as expensive as you think it may be. And also oftentimes the savings of resolving the problem that you may be facing more quickly outweigh the costs of any hourly consultant that you would have in the plant. You can often get a lot of learnings, maybe not just have the core problem solved, but also adjacent problems or identify adjacent issues that maybe you had become blind to or your team may not have seen, based on the expertise of the consultant.
Well, definitely sounds like you have a lot of experience, a lot of insight into this. So I wanted to start with three big misconceptions when it comes to consultants. So maybe you can help, explain these away a little bit. Misconception one being, they're just going to come in, tell us what we already know, and hand us a big bill.
Yeah, so I mean, the reality is, a good food consultant doesn't just point out the fire that's happening. They bring the hose, but they also to help put that out. But they, as I mentioned, they provide specialized technical execution. So, they point out like, when was the last time your process was validated? Maybe they can help you with scaling your recipe, as I'm talking about for these small and medium-sized producers. Maybe they never had a spoilage organism before and don't realize that by scaling a particular ingredient, they're introducing, a higher burden of a particular organism in that ingredient. So that's the level or granularity of the expertise that an external consultant can really bring to your team that your internal team may simply not have the hours to look into or the specific training to do. You can get very highly trained consultants. And really, the nice thing, when you think about it with consultants, is oftentimes these are very senior level professionals that have either like worked in industry and retired, and have come back to do consulting so they can offer, just that absolute direct expertise on your particular product line. Or, that it could be consulting for, if it's not for a food safety or quality issue, I mean, like legal consulting or even consulting on your product label. These are all areas that your staff may just, again, not have the hours in the day to look into, or maybe not able to see the risks of what is going on in the facility that an outside expert can point out.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's always important to have an outside set of eyes. So that's great. Misconception number two, I think, everyone thinks they have a unique product, and, maybe they do have a unique product, but I think a lot of companies would think, this consultant isn't going to understand our unique product, our unique culture, et cetera. How would you overcome that misconception?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the concern is valid, but if you think through, yes, you may be the only producer on the market producing your particular product, and that's what makes you unique and special. Absolutely. But, you know, operational bottlenecks aren't unique, right? Food safety and quality issues are not unique. Regulatory constraints for whatever product type you have are not unique to you or your product. So when you start to look at it through that lens, I think that can help you overcome that initial objection, to understand that, like, although your product and maybe your culture, whether that's you're a family run and owned business or you're a corporation with many facilities and many different kinds of personnel in your facility, when you start to think through what the problem is, that's again the expertise that consultants can bring to really help you overcome that hurdle. You are unique in a lot of ways, but you're not unique in a lot of the ways that consultants can help you.
And you just mentioned family owned, small type of operations, and you mentioned that earlier as well. I think the third misconception is, we're just a small mom and pop shop, we're family owned, we're small, mid-size. Consultants are really only for these big, massive conglomerates, but I'm sure you can tell us why that's not true.
Yeah, I mean, again, the small and medium-sized companies, the family owns, like those are the ones that are going to get the most value from a consultant, because you have to think, if you're paying for a consultant to come on site, and maybe you're engaging them for a day rate or an hourly rate, they're an open book. You can ask them, anything you'd like. So you can leverage their time, that they're with you, to ask them to help you with whatever comes to mind. And those small organizations, again, can really look to outsource some of the things that may be too expensive. Maybe you don't have time or the resources on your payroll to employ a full-time labeling and regulatory person. You could hire someone to help you with that. Maybe you don't have time or the resources to have someone come in. Maybe someone on your FSQA team is out on maternity leave or out on paternity leave. You can hire a consultant to come in, like a day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, whatever frequency you need to complete those tasks, so that you're not completely flying blind. So I think it's really really asking the question, right? Like, what is the problem that you have at hand? What's the problem you're looking to solve? And understanding that consultants can help with really any of those problems. It's not like a one size fits all model. You don't need to think I only call consultants when I'm having a criticality issue, like a recall or a food safety issue. Consultants can be applied to really anything that you're facing in your facility and can really provide a lot of value, again, at a really reasonable rate that's, constrained. You can set your budget, you can set, what you think is reasonable. And typically, an organization like Mérieux NutriSciences and our consultancy, we can meet you there.
So now that you've cleared up some of the misconceptions, let's go back to that. You mentioned an outside set of eyes. In your opinion, what do you see as the top three reasons that a manufacturer would need an outside set of eyes?
That's a great question, Mark. I mean, from my perspective, top three reasons right now. I mean, the regulatory minefield that the food industry is facing right now. There's major regulatory updates shifting rapidly. We've seen like the FSMA 204 traceability rule deadlines coming up, which compliance isn't optional for that. One recall or one misstep can ruin a brand. I mean, I'm sure that we can think of multiple brands that have had issues over the last year or so, and you can remember who they are, right? Second thing I think is the issues with using co-packers. I mean, most of our food brands have transitioned from owning their manufacturing operations to co-brand, like using co-packers to actually manufacturers. And consultants can really help our customers act as translators between the brand and the manufacturer to really understand what that co-manufacturer is delivering in terms of quality and compliance to make sure they're aligned with that particular brand's needs if they're choosing to use a co-packer. And then last, speed to market. So just everything is moving so quickly right now. If it's taking your internal R&D team over a year to launch a clean label product, for example, like if you're changing your colorants or changing your stabilizers to meet, MAHA requirements or state to state requirements, a consultant can help you formulate and launch it in 6 potentially. A consultant can come in and help you look at your label and get that label aligned much faster than maybe your internal team could if you're tasking an internal person to do multiple things. So I'd really break it out into those three areas. So, regulatory, making sure your co-packers or co-manufacturers are in line and your speed to market. I think that's the biggest three we're seeing trending right now.
All right, so we've covered three big misconceptions. We've talked about the reasons a manufacturer would want a set of outside eyes. What would you say to a producer who's still a little hesitant to get into consulting? What advice would you give them?
I would say to a customer considering consultants to just try it. That'd be my advice. I think you have a lot more to gain than to lose. You have the ability to, scope your project, name your price, understand how much you're looking to spend. And I think the worst case, if you use a consultant and you don't have the outcome you're looking for, which in my mind isn't very likely if you are good at describing what your need is, it can really help you do just that. Like next time you're looking to bring in outside expertise, really help you diagnose and outline the problem and the outcome you're seeking. So I think it helps you be more efficient in your thought processes when you're looking at things going on in your facility or in your brand or on your label. So I think again, there's a lot more to gain than the risk of losing, $1,000 or a few $1,000s by in involving a consultant in your process. Again, they're at your disposal when they're there. You're paying for them. You can leverage them in any way that you need within reason within your facility. So I think that you should try it. Worst case scenario, you don't like the consultant or you don't like the experience, then now but you don't know until you try it.
Well, that's great advice. And again, thank you so much for your expertise in joining us today.
Mark, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be with you. Again, last piece of advice and shameless plug is, just ask. We can probably do that at Mérieux NutriSciences. So if you have questions around what our consultancy can do for you or your brand, or what value we can bring, please just ask. We're happy to talk to you. We do not charge for conversations on the phone or emails, just to scope out your project. We're happy to help. So thanks again, Mark.
Thanks, Will. And to all of our listeners, thanks for joining us on Lab to Table, and we will see you next time.